Welcome to the first episode of Series 77, everyone. This series, we welcomed Mike from Living Metal Games to talk about their new game, Crucible of Aether, a mystical industrial TTRPG. In today's episode, we learn all about this game and start diving into character creation. But before we get to that, here's what to expect in our calls to action. You can join me here after the show to hear all about the latest news from the One Shot Network. We'll also have another update in our social media presence going forward, info about our Patreon, patron thank yous, a note about the Crucible of Aether Kickstarter, and one final social call to action for this election season here in the US. With all of that out of the way, enjoy the show, everyone. Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan. In this episode, my co-host Amelia and I are excited to welcome Mike from Living Metal Games to discuss their new game, Crucible of Aether, a mystic industrial TTRPG where you hone your skills, explore the world, and forge a life in the tumultuous Odayan Empire.
Mike, welcome to Character Creation Cast. I'm so excited that you are joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm stoked to be here.
Are you ready to tell us everything about this game? Just
Absolutely.
Maybe read to us from the core book if you want to.
Yeah, we could do a live reading if you want. 100%.
We should do that sometime. Can you go ahead and tell our audience who you are, your pronouns, what sorts of things you do, what you're working on, where they can find you on social media these days, maybe sometimes, all of the good stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, I'm Mike Macagnone. I'm one of the writers and do some game design for the game, Crucible of Aether. Pronouns are he, him. This is my first big publishing project in the tabletop world, and you can find me at the Crucible of Aether social media accounts. Aether_Crucible pretty much everywhere except for Bluesky, where for really only the fact that we forgot, we went with a different naming scheme. We are Crucible of Aether on Bluesky.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's fine. Well, let's go ahead and get into this, and we will start by discussing what this game is all about.
What's in a game?
Mike, can you tell me what the core concepts are of Crucible of Aether?
Yeah, so the big thing about Crucible of Aether is that you're a character who is living in the world. And the big thing that we emphasize is character development happens diegetically. You improve at the skills you use, you gain abilities by, choices you make in the game, whether it's, you join an organization and have access to the abilities of people who are members of that organization, or you become a thief by stealing things and gain more thief-like abilities. It's very focused on who your character becomes over the course of the adventure by mechanically supporting those choices, and your character gets better at the things that you do.
Getting some Fallout and or Elder Scrolls vibes.
Yes. Very much. If people who are familiar with old school Fallout or Morrowind, things like that, yes, you absolutely improve at the things that you do.
We know how all of our listeners will know how I feel about that. About skill growth based on things that you actually do. You cannot go cave diving and then get a rank in sailing. You cannot do it. It is not okay. It's the hill I will die on. Can you tell us a little bit about the setting of this game?
Yes. So we call the setting Mystic Industrial, and the core concept is, what if there was an industrial revolution, but instead of the steam engine, it occurred because we started taking advantage of these still functioning ruins of a long vanished civilization that we don't really understand. And we're not going to worry about that because we're making money, is the sort of the core engine of the setting. And then all of the fallout from that rippling out through the world in the ways that people interact with each other, in the ways that groups of people interact with each other, ideas playing off of each other. It's very much meant to be a world in flux, and you're playing characters who are dealing with that.
Very nice. What sort of tools do we need to play the game?
Yeah, so you can play the game, obviously, with the book that we've got, and we're going to be putting out, as well as standard set of dice and character sheet. We've got, physical character sheets. Obviously, you can print it out. And also today we're going to be making characters with one that we've got that is a form fillable PDF that does all of the calculations for you for statistics and things like that.
Very fancy. I'm a big fan of things that don't require me to do additional math.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I've done plenty of characters fully longhand, and it's nice to be able to play in person and play with a character sheet that you filled out. But at the same time, having something do the calculations for you is, it's just easier sometimes, especially as a GM, to have the calculations done for you.
Yeah, there are definitely pluses of doing it both ways. And especially when it's a game that you've played for a long time, there is something fun about I can fill these things in from memory. I know exactly how many points this thing costs and all that kind of stuff. But especially, when it's your first time playing and stuff too, it's always really nice to have those kinds of tools to just kind of ease you along as you're already taking in all that new information.
Yeah. Yeah. And then because it's automatic, you can play around with some of your choices and see what their effects are without having committed to, writing it down physically on a character sheet.
Yes, that's true too. It does make things a lot easier to change and finagle later on too.
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, like when you're filling in a Scantron sheet and you miss a question and now all of your bubbles are off for the rest of that.
Oh no.
There's a stress stream that I still have. Oh. What kinds of stories and themes do you want to explore in this game? Because I know you talked a little bit about we don't care where this came from because we're making money, and sort of this post-industrial kind of. I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah, so a lot of the games end up focusing on some of those themes, sort of industrialization, a little bit of class exploitation, things like that. But the mechanics of the game itself very much focus on, what your character is doing and who they become as a result of the troubles that you are dealing with. So it's less concerned with the trouble itself, more concerned with who your character becomes as a result of the choices you made to deal with that obstacle.
So all the kind of moral fallout basically from your decisions and what that kind of does for your character's personal story and growth and whatnot.
Yeah. So for instance, if you cooked a meal to poison a rival rather than taking out a gun and shooting them, that experience in the cooking skill, that just sticks with you. That's there on your character sheet. It's not going away. You made that decision, you made that roll, and it's there.
Wow. Quite an example.
I mean, it's...
No, it illustrates the point beautifully.
But at the same time, if you lifted rubble off of a trapped child, that athletics experience is there too.
That's true. Yeah. That is true.
So we've got kind of this magical backdrop, kind of mystical sort of technology and whatnot. What does that translate to with what characters can do in this game? I know we got plenty of actual regular examples, but what else can characters do, and what kind of goals do they work towards usually?
Yeah, so don't open this book and expect like D&D 5e level of high fantasy shenanigans. There's a magic system. It's very grounded in, particular aspects of the world. And it very much encourages players and parties to engage with sort of the setting of where they are, of, okay, you are in this town, you're interacting with the people in this town, you're cajoling them, you're trying to convince them to do something, you're opposing something they want to do. It's very much encouraging you to live sort of in the shoes of the character, because your options are influenced by what the character is good at and the decisions you've made building that character over the course of the adventure.
Very cool.
Yeah. And to sort of complete a thought, so for instance, you might join an organization of magical blacksmiths, essentially, that you have magic that ties into metal and building things, creating things, recycling things like that. And it's your ties to that organization give you that magic. It's not as though all of a sudden, you open up the book and you've got, necromantic magic all of a sudden. No, you joined an organization of magical blacksmiths. They do magical blacksmith things.
Okay, but can you still do necromantic stuff somehow in this?
Yeah. No, there's a
it's like, don't tell
thing.
me no, kick you right off the show.
Oh, you can straight up. You can. It's not in the beta that we've released, but in the full game, you can fully become an undead priest,
Great.
Or undead warrior. Whole shebang is in the full game.
Then you may have my seal of approval.
Okay.
I'm gonna make little stickers to like send to game companies. Be like, you can put this little seal in your book that Amelia says this is necromancy approved.
Yes.
That's really cool though. But it sounds like there's kind of like a crafting system in the game as well.
Yes. Yeah. So there is a full crafting system in the game. So every way that you interact with the game is based off of skills. So you have a metalworking skill, you have a athletic skill, a cooking skill, and those all, it's the same system and just different ways that you interact with the system, including crafting. So there are characters who I've played and others have played who just very much focus on crafting, and it might be making something that's great for the party to use, making something that's great for my character to use, building something that is the home base of the party, stuff like that. Absolutely. And there's also good ways to, in the GM side of things, to encourage, the story to move forward, even while interacting with things like the crafting system, where it's like, okay, without having intention in how you approach it, crafting is kind of a thing that's selfish. You sort of go off into your own corner and make something. But we kind of encourage, like, okay, where are you getting the stuff from? Does the person that you're getting your supplies from want something from you that then ties back into the main plot? That sort of deal.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And also, if somebody wants to make a warhammer that is perpetually on fire and sets the things that you hit with it on fire, absolutely, you can do that.
Go do that then. whatever your little heart desires.
Yeah, live your bliss.
Absolutely, live your bliss.
What do you feel like makes this game unique from other kind of fantasy games, other games that have that sort of crafting thing? And, like, I always like to ask people, like, what made you want to make this game?
I think the big thing for us has always been that there's not necessarily that distance between the mechanics of the game and the story that you're telling. Like in a lot of, and this I think is particularly in something like Pathfinder, you'll grab a level in a class as part of leveling up because, monk is fantastic for a martial class. Absolutely. Let's grab that level in monk. And that has no bearing whatsoever to the story or what's happening at the table. The thing that our game does is everything really is focused on happening in the fiction. If you get better at a skill, it's because you spent time using that skill. If you gain a career, which is the system doesn't have classes. It's got careers that are collections of abilities. If you gain a career, it's because you made a decision that gave your character access to that career. You got hired as a mercenary in a particular mercenary company. You joined a religious institution. You got a government position. And that's where the abilities come from, not necessarily, oh, this chart says that it's really good for me to get this level in this class at this level.
Right.
It's really focused on the story that you're telling is reflected in the character mechanically.
I like that.
Yeah, I always much prefer that. Like, I always think like mechanics should influence and kind of drive with the story that you are trying to tell. Like, I don't like a game where I'm telling a story in spite of the mechanics that are in front of me. I want the mechanics to like kind of to tell you, like one of the other NES judges that I worked with in the past always says, I want the game to tell me where the fun is. And then when I go to do that, I want it to support me in having that kind of fun.
Yeah.
And so like, I want the mechanics to really help me tell the story that the game is built around.
Absolutely. So when did you first start developing Crucible of Aether?
So I came into this relatively late in the game's development. I started writing for the game almost 3 years ago. It's been in development for a long time. The lead designer, Jackie, has been working on it about a decade.
Oh, wow.
This is all of our first project, but we've learned a lot about game design and writing over the course of iterating on this project. My coming onto the team was really rooted in the way that I liked to tell stories in tabletop games that sort of very much jived with what Jackie wants to do with the game. That I think the turning point was when I ran a 5e campaign that was completely milestone and completely sandbox. And they leveled based off of when they advanced the story. And it was a thing that I was very transparent of. I'm asking you a question right now. And when you answer it in the story, you're going to level. And been in public playtesting for about 8 months now, just sort of fine-tuning some things, making sure that the systems play out in the ways that we intend, and feel fun at the table, because to actually make like a stone structure takes weeks. That's not something that somebody wants to take the time to do. That would absolutely bog down a table. So figuring out a way to abstract things to a certain point that they still feel fun and then also feel rewarding to invest your time in as a character, things like that. Absolutely things that we've been working on. And making sure that the idea that we have in our mind of what we want this game to be matches the reality on the page and at the table.
Yeah. Well, and I think playtesting too is always a good way to find out, like, does it feel that way to everyone? Too,
yes.
Because I think we talked about this with another one that we covered recently, that it's like you playtest something at your own table for so long that, like, those people have pulled all of the tricks that they're going to pull, but when you take it to another table, people find new ways to break it, or new ways to like play with the rules that you did not intend, or whatever. So always the playtesting phase of things always really interests me. To kind of just see what happens when you give it to other people who, who haven't seen like what you meant to do the whole way. They just see what's in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was also an interesting feeling to write a module as an onboarding for new GMs and then hand it off to somebody who hasn't played the game and be like, hey, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a weird feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Well, how do you decide like how much detail to put in there? And I always think of those like those projects they give you in like 3rd or 4th grade or something, where it's like, explain how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it's like, take the knife. And it's always like, you give it to a parent or something and they do like the stupidest thing. And they're like, they hold the knife the wrong way and they don't open the jar. And it's like, okay, how much of this is common sense though? And you could figure it out. And how much do I need to guide you?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, one philosophy that we've come up with for the game is that, and in describing it, is that good role play should translate to interesting roles of skill checks, not get you out of skill checks. Because that's the point of the game, is to interact with the skill checks. And it's like, if you came up with a clever way for your character to negotiate their way out of a situation, you don't rob them of the opportunity to get XP in diplomacy or something like that. They might get a really good bonus for it, but you got to have the tension of that role at the table.
Yeah.
And you got to reward good role play through bonuses and stuff like that. But the reward comes in a really good check that can move the story forward or not, depending on whether they fail it or not.
Which is an interesting philosophy of like clearly what you want your game to do, because there are lots of other games where, you know, where people do role play and you're like, you know what, you've done that so well, like I don't think you need to make a check. Let's go ahead and, you know, whereas yours is very much like, no, I want you to have the opportunity to get the XP, and, you know, the idea of like that helps your role, but it doesn't mean you don't have to make one.
Yes. And the idea is that what you're investing your time in at the table is what your character is going to get better at. So if you are really heavy into role play, really heavy into social interaction, you should be rewarded mechanically by having skill checks that build your character's abilities to match what you're bringing to the table from a role play perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like there are any terms or concepts that people need to know before we jump into the actual art of character creation here?
Yeah, so I have mentioned them a few times. The game boils down to skills, and the total number that you're going to have at those skills. All of the choices that we're going to make over the course of character creation are going to influence the skills at the end. So when I'm talking about some other thing about origin or attributes or things like that, you should keep in mind that it's sort of funneling into what those skill totals are. And that array of skill totals at the end is sort of what we're building towards for the start of a character. And the big decisions that are a factor in what that character becomes are your fantastical origins. There are no human beings in this world. There are 4 different fantastical origins in the game. Then you're choosing a home nation, so where your character was born in the Empire of Odayan. Your attribute scores, so we've got 8 in the game: physical, dexterity, endurance, speed, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and spirit. The physical ones generally sort of pretty straightforward. The one that people talk about is the difference between dexterity and speed. For us, the idea is dexterity, you could juggle really well. Speed, quick on the draw. Able to get off the blocks on a sprint sort of thing is your speed stat. Intelligence and wisdom are kind of straightforward. Charisma is sort of social ability, outgoingness, roughly, but spirit is sort of self-assuredness and sense of self. Somebody with high spirit would be very strong in their sense of self, maybe stubborn. Somebody with low spirit may be open to new experiences, but also very easy to influence, like that sort of idea. And then we have some optional traits that somebody can choose. So for instance, they could be stronger than average. They could be more cynical. They could be more leaning into their fantastical origin. So for instance, the Keanosans, who are a little bit canine, they've got some traits that tie into both their magic as well as their canine heritage. They could literally have claws and fangs. And then there is your background. So not only where was your character born, but how were they raised? Were they raised in a high society household? Were they raised, in the slums? Were they an orphan on the streets? Things like that all influence the final bit, which is, where you get your character skills at the end. And then there's one last thing, where you choose a career, which is every character at the start of the game has one career that they start with and can unlock more over the course of play. So it might be an institution that you joined early in life. It might be you stole things to survive, so you're a thief. You became apprenticed to a blacksmith and started working in the shop, things like that. Just that is where your character starts, and your adventures go from there.
All right.
Very cool. All right. Well, it sounds like we've got enough to get started. So shall we make some people?
Let's do it.
Sounds fantastic.
Let's make some people.
Let's make some people.
So what do we need to do first for character creation here?
Yeah, so first up, we are going to be choosing a fantastical origin. We are going to be choosing between one of 4 here. They are, broadly, they are Assylian, so a little bit rodent-like, Osirtian, a little bit insect-like. You've got ant people, praying mantis sort of people, moth sort of people, Keanosin, and that is canine-like, wolves, tanuki, jackals, foxes sort of deal. And then last is Valthurian, and they are a little bit avian-like. So they've got feathers on their hands, feathers on their faces, things like that. Everybody has a little bit of a touch of the animal that they're sort of associated with. The wonderful art from our artist, Emily, has really brought these to life, that it's not fully like the canine person is on 4 limbs, but they've got claws, they've got fur, they've got their eyes are a little bit different, they have fangs, things like that. So sort of thinking about it as a twist on human more so than completely alien to our experience. And choosing between these origins, they give you further options down the road. They do not dictate anything about your character right now. So for instance, the Assylian characters, if you choose an Assylian origin, you have additional options of traits that you can choose down the line, physical traits. So for instance, you could have more sensitive hearing, you could be better at digging into the ground, or you could be tied to magic in a different way than other fantastical origins. So, for instance, the Osirtians, they have a trait that you can get called the compound vision. The idea being that your vision is a little bit more insect-like, and you also get profound visions that are determined by the GM as a result of that physical trait. Sort of tying back into your fantastical origin. So I have built a lot of characters in the system. I am going to start choosing some of these randomly to get it going and see what sort of story develops from this character.
All right.
So I'm rolling a d4 here to choose between the 4, and we are looking at 3. I am going to make a Keanosin this time. And what you do is when you choose your origin, what you do write down first is an origin perk that you get regardless of what other choices you make. I get one called Lupin's Hunter, which gives me a specific bonus to perception checks involving scent. The idea being that all Keanosins have a sense of smell that is a little bit sharper than anybody else.
Okay. That's very cool. There's a lot of good flavor to each of these.
I know.
I
also like the art in here is just really good.
Oh yeah, we absolutely love.
Very evocative.
Yeah. Our artists are fantastic at really bringing these ideas to life. And also, while you're sort of choosing, I can give sort of broad strokes of history of the world here and sort of people's places.
Please do.
Absolutely. So right now, the game is set a little bit more than 200 years after the start of this industrial revolution that was led by a group of Valthurian-led nations, so avian person-led nations that have a stranglehold really on this ancient technology and the new inventions that are coming with this industrial revolution. And they are sort of the top of the social order at the moment. The Keanosin led peoples were previously on top, and they are coming to grips with the new reality. The Osirtians have a long tradition of doing their own thing. They have historically had a relationship with their various flavors of religions that are broadly dedicated to ending death as a concept, and they all have their individual takes on it. The last origin is the Assyrians. They actually are just one generation old. They emerged at the same time as a thing called the Awakening, where somebody accidentally turned on that ancient civilization machinery that people don't really understand. And simultaneous to that, a lot of monsters started pouring out of said ancient ruins, and Assyrians started being born to otherwise unsuspecting parents throughout the empire. And that caused a lot of social unrest, as you can imagine, if all of a sudden your child pops out different than anybody else. That, along with the other things, caused some of the erosion of institutions and conflicts throughout the empire that see where we are today.
I think I want to be a bird person.
Absolutely. Have at it.
I'm sorry, Mike, which one did you end up picking?
So mine would be the Valthurian.
Okay. And Mike,
And
what did you
I
pick?
went with a Keonosin.
Okay.
And I see there was those different types underneath the Valthurian ancestry. Do we hone in on one of those types right away?
No. It's more of sort of thinking about the lore and their place in the world. The particular ancestry that you choose does not have a mechanical effect. The idea being that Gridarians, sort of modeled on harpy eagles, they founded the nation of New Gridaria. You don't have to choose a Gridarian. If you choose a Gridarian, it doesn't mean anything different for your character, but it is sort of an idea to spur who that character is in the world and what they may look like, but it is not determinative.
I went with like bright feathers.
Particularly bright feathers, you're going to be looking at the Acellans or the Tuani. The Acellans are based off of cardinals and Tuani on bluebirds.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to go with the cardinal coded ones, the Acellians, because that is a big symbolic bird in my family.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
I don't know. I'm kind of just digging like the moth vibes. So I think
Ooh.
we're going to go Assertion.
Yeah, the moth vibes are fun.
Yeah. Where would I put this origin perk thing? Where does that go?
Yeah, so that would be on the first page, there's an abilities, bonuses, and penalties.
Got it.
For the Osirtians, right now, what you're going to want to do is just put an extra 2 in your physical and mental condition, just to remember that you're going to get an extra bit of physical and mental condition when we calculate that.
Okay.
Yeah, so Osirtians, they get a bit of extra physical and mental condition through their origin, and it just adds on top of what you get from the calculation.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So the next step in the process here is choosing your home nation, choosing where your character was born. There are 8 that are in the beta. There are 14 in the full game. The 8 that are here are Busos and the Twin Nations. Those 3 are all Keonosin-led nations, the canine people I mentioned earlier. Busos was founded by a bunch of ship captains who made absolute gobs of money by taking people to the current continent that the game is set on and charging them whatever they could get away with. And then they had all of this material wealth, and then somebody was like, but what if I took your material wealth? The concept of this country is like, what if everyone who fell over the lip of the cliff reaching for the Holy Grail at the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade just all landed together in a swamp and they were stuck together? And it's just everybody who takes over this area, everybody who moves to this area can't help but engage with the fact that there is all of this stuff that people care about that is here, and it is darn tempting. So that's Busos. And then we've got the Twin Nations, which are the 2 countries that are sort of the holdover from the old world, who have very different takes on how to restructure and deal with their society in a changing world. Whether it's sort of flirting with nativism or just being the most Jim Bro that they can, and having that be a country, which has its own benefits and foibles. And then we've got the 3 avian-led nations, which are Meisenland and Odeo or Lausland, which are what if the knights out of sort of Arthurian fairy tales were in charge of a country, and all of the problems that might ensue. And the other being, what if the people who hate the knights from Arthurian fairy tales were in charge of a country, and all of the problems that might entail. And then the last one of the 3 in the beta from the avian-led peoples is New Gradaria, which is just, what if you looked at Dickensian fiction as an instruction manual for building a society rather than a warning? Just absolutely 100% building an industrialized society off of an H.R. Geiger-inspired wasteland. And then the last 2 are Mishuruk, which is what if academics were in charge of doing research in a jungle and none of them ever died?
Oh.
And Kefentia, which is what if a bunch of engineers tried to solve the metaphysical problem of death and came up with a solution. It might not be the solution, but it's one they like. So those are the 8 different options. I am going to roll a D8 here and decide where my particular canine person is from. And that is a 6. They are going to be from Odeo or Lausland. This is a place that is just recently had a civil war. It is being heavily industrialized, and no one is happy. So that's awesome. So what I'm going to do now that I've chosen the home nation here, I'm going to write that down on my character sheet, and then I'm going to mark down the favored skills. The idea being that if you grew up somewhere, the culture there sort of generally is going to push you in a few directions that you'll advance a little bit quicker. You'll pick up on things a little bit quicker that were sort of in the water of where you were born. So I have favored skills: firearms, engineering, metalworking, science, survival, and deception. It is not a great place to live where this character was born.
Which one was the last one you were talking about death and not death? And
Yes. Kefentia.
Okay.
That is a very focused on their own brand of Wenurism, which is the sort of big religion for them that thinks that they have solved death by, when you're dying, putting your soul into a thing that they call a soul haven. That's basically a little battery. Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
So they go around collecting souls.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when you select that, you go ahead and mark down your favorite skills and the languages that you would have.
Right.
Still trying to pick. There's a lot of good ones in here.
Yeah, we really like the different nations that we've come up with, and just trying to set them in a way that it encourages a character to get moving.
Mm-hmm.
So do we just move those up to 1 then from 0?
No, sorry. There's a column with a star at the top. That is your favorite skills. Go ahead and just check that, and we can worry about that later. What happens with favorite skills is they advance more quickly.
That makes sense.
You have advantage on the dice roll for ranking up that skill. So when you rank up the skill, you roll 2d6, take the higher of the 2. So those skills will advance more quickly for your character.
So Numeva.
Yes,
Of
Numeva.
the Twin Nations looks like it might be interesting.
Yeah, they're sort of trying to preserve the old order, and it's, the rose-colored glasses version of the old order, ignoring some of the foibles and adding some of their own in Numeva.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll go with Numeva. So then it says favorite skills are block, polearm, agriculture, metalworking, athletics, and diplomacy.
Yeah. Go ahead, and there's that column with the stars, column with the star at the top. Just go ahead, and you should be able to click through to mark them down as favorite skills.
I got
Nice.
two-handed, engineering, stone cutting, divine, medical, and augmentation.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, fun little thing about Kefentia. those batteries that I mentioned earlier, they are how an undead is able to use mechanical augments. So there's a system in the game called augmentation where you can replace a body part or add something like a mechanical tail. And undead normally cannot use it unless they have one of those soul havens charged with the souls of the living. Yeah, so they have earned a little bit of a reputation for the liberal use of those soul havens. The When Years of Kufantia have. Yeah, so our next step here is you can choose the attribute scores that are sort of the foundational building block of where your character is going to end up. There's 5 different arrays that we have, 8 different scores, and it as you assign them, you'll get a little bit of an idea of what they're going to do for your character. This is where you can kind of start shaping who they are, and who a little bit of where you think they may end up. Are they a very physical person? Are they more intellectual? Are they very social, outgoing? Things like that. I am going to make a character here. I'm going to just roll again to see which array I get. All right, array number 2.
So it looks like there's 5 arrays to choose from, right?
Yeah, 5 arrays to choose from. And then you just assign one of each of those 8 numbers to your attributes. And then this sheet will fill out the modifier and the check for you. And then also it will eventually factor into your skill total. So each skill's total is both your rank in the skill as well as some contributing attributes.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically I like to think of it as the difference between somebody who is generally athletic stepping out onto a soccer field and trying to play goalie versus somebody who is not terribly athletic but has a lot of practice as a goalie. That's sort of the difference between having high attributes contributing to a skill versus a high level of skill. All right, so I got the second array, and I really like this array because it has a 6 in there, and I love having a character who has a defined weakness. Really fun personally for me to role play. I am going to make somebody here who is not terribly charismatic. Actually, I'm going to lean against type in this moment. I'm normally very much making a talky character. I'm going to put a 6 in charisma right here. This is out of character for me, as anybody who has played with me can attest. And they are not going to be terribly intelligent either.
I suppose I should look at like my starred skills here too and see like what they use. And perhaps play off of that. Although it looks like I've got kind of like a little bit of everything here. So
yeah. Generally the favored skills are sort of
spread out.
Yeah, it's generally very spread out, generally very like what would people who are living here be exposed to. So for instance, the Twin Nations, it's a very agrarian society, so you've got agriculture as favored skills for the Twin Nations, but New Gridaria, on the other hand, very industrialized, does not have agriculture as a favorite skill. That sort of thinking is what went into it when we were building these.
Yeah, so I decided to roll to, pick this array or whatever. And I will have 5, number 5, which ranges from 17 down to 5. So
yeah, that's a fun one. That is a fun high-low.
Very high,
the
and then we're
like too.
Garbage. So I have to decide what is my dump stat.
Yeah, it was an interesting because I was like, okay, well, I like the thought of my character being into metalworking because A, it's a favorite skill. B, I love blacksmiths, like the thought of playing a blacksmith in a game and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, well, endurance, that makes sense. So I had array 5, so I put 17 in endurance. And then I said, well, what's the secondary stat? Well, it's intelligence. So a second stat 14 went into intelligence. Like, well, where do I go from there? I want some strength because that feels right for a smith. So I put 13 in that. And then I wanted to be kind of charismatic as well, so I could sell my wares and whatnot. So I put 12 in charisma. And then I was like, well, I also want that 5 somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want this blacksmith to be methodical, but kind of slow at everything. So I put 5 in speed.
I put
So
my
I could
5
do
in
good
speed
work.
as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
I just don't, imagine being real quick.
Yeah. So then I just went from there and I was like, well, wisdom and spirit are kind of important to this character as well. So I put the 11s there and that left a 7 for dexterity. So I'm like, my person's just not very fast physically.
Yeah.
Not very dexterous, kind of clumsy when not doing the stuff that they are inclined to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to show up as you look at, skill levels that, a character who's particularly specialized in something, but doesn't have a whole lot of attributes, high attributes supporting that. The moment you get out of your specialization, you're very much a fish out of water. And that, at least for me, creates a very interesting storytelling moment of all of a sudden a character is out of their element. What do they do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So once you have assigned all the attributes, what we're going to do here is you have the option of choosing a mental and a physical trait. These are all optional ways to sort of tweak your character, and most of them have a benefit and a cost. You also get an additional optional mental trait as a result of your home nation, and an additional physical trait option as a result of your fantastical origin that leans into the fantastical origin. So for instance, for choosing the Keanosan origin, I've got the option of alpha-blooded. So I've got physical natural weapons. I've got Born of Moonlight, which is I've got bonuses when I'm in dim lighting or darkness, as well as penalties when I'm in bright light. Or Sunchild, which is the flip side of that, which is bonuses when I'm in bright light and penalties when I'm in darkness, as well as Downy Coat, which is covered in a little bit more fur than average and a little bit warmer than average. The idea being the additional physical traits are leaning into either the fantastical animalness of the origin or the magical ties that those particular origins have to the world. A lot of the magic of the Keanosans is tied into the sun and the moon.
I like that.
So, and then also the home nations have particular mental traits, sort of the idea being that where you were born could affect how you think, but it doesn't necessarily do so. So, for instance, having home nation of Kefentia, Amelia, you got the option of one called Fervid Pursuit. The idea being when you fail on a check, you can suffer a little bit of mental stress to make it succeed anyway. And I'm thinking myself for this character, I'm thinking somebody who has had to scrape by to survive in a place that has not been particularly nice to live in. And I am going to choose the paranoid trait, which brings with it bonuses to perception and investigation checks, as well as bonus to initiative. The idea being that you are always on the lookout and always looking. But also the mental stress that you take from any source is increased by 50%. So by being on all the time, you're a little bit more vulnerable.
So are we doing one physical and one mental?
Yes, it's one physical and one mental, and they are entirely optional.
I gotta take one, right? I mean,
they're a ton of fun. They are a ton of fun.
Such good. Okay, so when I originally picked my character, I was like, ooh, bright feathers. I think that would be fantastic. And literally one of the traits is blessed plumage, which has a rare crest of glowing plumes. and are a catalyst for magic. Which I didn't think magic going into this, but you know what? Somebody that's got this blessed plumage that was like, nah, I'm gonna be a blacksmith. It's interesting to me.
Awesome.
So then from our origins too, like there's listed special physical trait options.
Yeah.
So those just additional ones that I could choose that other people couldn't? Okay.
So your choice of origin impacts the pool of options that you have.
Gotcha. Okay.
Everybody has a little bit of a different pool, but everybody's got sort of the common choices. And for my origin trait, I think I'm going to go Born of Moonlight. This guy has not had, or this person has not had a good life. They are paranoid and they stick to the dark, and they are living in a place that had a civil war recently.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that.
I really loved learning about this game. Mike was fantastic in describing like the background of the world and this kind of epic industrial landscape with some mystical undertones, which is really cool to learn about. I do love a game that has a good, like, rich lore behind it. I also love a game that's like a blank slate as well, but like when a game has lore to work off of, having that like rich lore that you can kind of dig into during play is really cool as well. But I do love the character creation for this game as well, and we get into it a little bit here, but it's kind of life path light, which I enjoyed. But we have plenty of series left, so I won't spoil much, but I can't wait for you to hear the rest of this series. It is fantastic, and we've got some wonderful discussion to go along with it. So before we let you go for the day, we do have some calls to action, so here we go. First up, if you like what you've been hearing about Crucible of Aether so far, their Kickstarter pre-launch page is live. You can find that down in the show notes and head right over there to save the Kickstarter to notify you when it launches. We can't wait for you to hear more about it in the coming weeks. In other news, if you head on over to the One Shot Network Patreon, you can hear all of our Session 0 for the Chimera AP that will be appearing on the One Shot podcast feed at some point in the near future. This is all because we hit our first goal for the network Patreon during the Patreon drive last month, and in exchange, former guests Dylan Apalian and Tracy Barnett will record a bonus series of character creation cast that we will feature right here on our feed. I have no idea what game they will cover, but it'll be a delight either way. We will have more information about those events as the details solidify. In other news, because of how Twitter has been completely abandoned in terms of user safety and with no way to opt out of feeding your data to their AI, we are going all in on Bluesky as the social media platform of choice for the show and for our own personal accounts. So if you want to follow along with any updates about the show, that and our Discord server are the best ways to get a hold of that information. On Bluesky, we can be found at creationcast.net. If you head there, you can find a starter pack that has both of our accounts as well as all of our guests. Amelia also has a starter pack for all of the One Shot Network folks that we found on the network as well. These are great ways to follow a bunch of fantastic people as soon as you join, or if you've even been there for a while. We will hope to see you there, and you can always check the last part of our show notes for our social media information as well. So there are a lot of ways to get a hold of us. In addition to all of that, this is the very last reminder for folks in the US to ensure that you get out and vote on Tuesday, November 5th, if you haven't already. There is a good handful of states that allow same-day registration. I know Wisconsin is one of them, So if you missed the registration deadline, you may still be in luck, so you want to double check that. This election is one of the most important elections of our lives so far, and the more of our listeners that are eligible to vote here in the US and get out to vote, the better. And don't forget about all of the non-presidential folks on the ticket. You can do your research ahead of time or head to vote.gov to learn about who is all on your ballot before heading out to the polls. Not to mention a lot of referendums across the whole country that are extremely important and extremely confusing in most cases. So you want to do some research on those to make sure you're voting the way that you think is the way you're voting. Again, this is so very important. Make sure you have a voting plan and make sure you take time to enact it. Finally, if you like what we are doing and want to support our show, please head on over to Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast and sign up for any of our basic tiers as a free trial. Each level has a ton of great rewards associated to it. I personally would really love to be able to do a lot more for our listeners, but currently we do at least have stickers you could get. We for sure have a lot of dice that we can still give away to folks. And we also have bonus episodes like Chit Chats and more. Right now, we're well under our operating budget and could use some assistance from you. Even $1 a month would go a long way if enough of you were able to pitch in. We might have to figure out a new way to thank everyone in the episodes if we get 100 extra folks give it $1 more a month. But we'd at least be able to offer cool bonus perks like yearly subscriptions at a discounted price and a lot of other things that we could do with that. For now, we'd like to thank our current patrons as normal. Your support truly helps us out a great deal, so let's get this started. TJG, aka Tigranosaurus, Eric Bonts, and Daryl Holiday II, you all rock, thank you. Shadim Cabal, The Shyest Barbarian, and Benjamin Sweeney, we appreciate your support, thank you. Rob Fletcher, Kevin Brown, and Tentacle Duck, thank you for your support. Thank you to John Adamus, A3 Sketchpad, and Cole McCallum. Your support brings us so much joy. Thanks, Carlos Salazar, Eric S., and Ian Potmeyer. We are so glad to have you with us. Liam G., Brian Colm, and Garden GM, thanks for supporting our dreams. Tanglefoot, Blue Kryptonite, and Danny, thank you for your support. Nicole Trainer, Liam Murray, and Kenning, you shouldn't have, but we are so glad that you did. Brian Kurtz, Mark E. Fair, and Drew Owen, thank you so much for your continued support as well. And thank you to all of our future patrons. Every bit of support here helps tremendously, and we are incredibly grateful to all of you. If you are already supporting the Patreon or can't afford to do so right now and still want to show your support for the show, the next best way to do so is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, or even Facebook. We'll read your review right here and thank you personally. That's all that we have for today's episode. Join us next time where we finish making our characters with Mike for Crucible of Aether. But until then, take care everyone. Stay safe, drink some water, please vote if you can, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Debate This asks the bold questions other podcasts are afraid to ask about our favorite comic books and video games.
So far, all we know about Mr. The Rock's upcoming project is that it is, quote, one of the biggest, most badass games, and, quote, one that he's played for years. What video game adaptation do you think he will star in, and as what character?
The answers are, well, delivered boldly and confidently.
Kirby games, on the other hand, are all about his copy abilities, his powers. In short, guys, a Kirby game is about drive. It's about power.
No! Oh my god!
I will
Guys,
not be part of this.
Kirby stays hungry yet he devours.
Find Debate This on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you download podcasts.
How did he slip this by us, guys?
No, how did we get this?
I did it!
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter and Bluesky at CreationCast, or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter and Bluesky at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter and Bluesky at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.